"Get your filthy hands off me!" Reagan screamed, the sound tearing through the polite jazz music of the ballroom. Crash! A crystal champagne flute shattered against the marble floor, silencing the crowd instantly. 300 heads turned. In the center of the room, Reagan Ford stood trembling, red wine dripping down her borrowed white dress. Standing over her, sneering with a napkin in hand, was the man she had loved for 5 years. "Security!" Vincent Dawson barked, his voice devoid of warmth, his eyes like ice. "Remove this trash from the premises. She's upsetting my fiancé." He didn't look at Reagan. He looked past her, toward a blonde woman smiling cruelly in the corner. The humiliation wasn't just a moment. It was a weapon, and Vincent had just pulled the trigger. The evening had begun with a suffocating sense of dread, though Reagan Ford couldn't quite place the source. It was their 5th wedding anniversary. 5 years of supporting Vincent Dawson, of editing his architectural blueprints late into the night until her eyes burned, of living in the shadows while he basked in the spotlight of Dawson and Associates. They were at the Sapphire Lounge, the most exclusive venue in the city. Vincent had insisted on it. Reagan had worn her best dress, a modest navy blue silk that had seen better days, and had spent an hour trying to tame her chestnut hair. She wanted to look the part of a rising CEO's wife. But when she arrived at the table, Vincent wasn't alone. Sitting across from him, sipping a martini with a languid, predatory grace, was Hayden Jensen. Hayden was everything Reagan wasn't: sharp-edged, impeccably dressed in designer labels, and radiating old money. She was the daughter of the city's zoning commissioner, a connection Vincent had been desperate to secure. Reagan froze, clutching her purse strap. "Vincent, what is this?" Vincent didn't stand up to greet her. He checked his watch, a Rolex Reagan had saved for 2 years to buy him. "You're late, Reagan. Sit down. We have business to discuss." "Business?" Reagan's voice wavered. "It's our anniversary." Hayden let out a short, tinkling laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Oh, honey, that's adorable. You actually thought this was a celebration." Reagan looked at Vincent, pleading for him to correct the woman, to defend her. Instead, Vincent sighed, running a hand through his slicked-back hair. He looked at Reagan, not with hatred, but with something far worse: indifference. He looked at her like she was an outdated piece of furniture he was waiting to haul to the curb. "Reagan, let's not make a scene," Vincent said smoothly. He slid a manila envelope across the polished mahogany table. "Liam has already drawn up the papers. It's a standard dissolution of marriage. Irreconcilable differences." Reagan felt the blood drain from her face. The room seemed to tilt. "Divorce?" "Vincent, we just bought the house. We were talking about—" "You were talking," Vincent corrected, his tone sharpening. "I was enduring. Look at you, Reagan. Look at this dress. Look at your desperate need to be useful. You're an anchor, dragging me down. I need a partner who understands power, who understands the world I'm building." He reached over and took Hayden's hand. Hayden smirked, interlacing her fingers with his. "Hayden brings connections, capital, and class to the firm," Vincent said. "You bring casseroles and unsolicited edits on my designs." "Your designs," Reagan whispered, a spark of anger finally igniting in her chest. "Vincent, I drew the schematics for the Riverside project. I fixed the load-bearing issues on the metro tower. You would have been sued for negligence if I hadn't stayed up for 3 nights fixing your math." Vincent's face darkened. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "And who signed those blueprints, Reagan? Me. My name is on the door. My name is the brand. You are nothing but a glorified secretary with a sketching hobby. Nobody knows you. Nobody cares about you." He snapped his fingers. Liam Walker, Vincent's college friend and sleazy corporate lawyer, materialized from the bar area, placing a pen on the table. "Sign it, Reagan," Liam said, his voice oily. "The prenup is ironclad. You get the Honda, your personal effects, and a check for $5,000 to help you transition. If you fight this, Vincent freezes the joint accounts immediately. You'll be on the street tonight." "He's already frozen them," Hayden said, checking her phone with a bored expression. "I had him do it an hour ago, just to be safe." Reagan stared at the papers. The betrayal was so total, so absolute, it felt physical, like a blow to the solar plexus. She looked at the man she had nursed through the flu, the man she had believed in when he was a nobody. "I won't sign," Reagan said, her voice trembling but audible. "I want my share of the company. I built it with you." Vincent laughed. It was a dry, ugly sound. "You have no proof. You have no degree. You have nothing. Sign, or I make sure you never work in this town again." Reagan stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Keep the money. Keep the house. But you will never have my respect again." She turned to leave, but Hayden wasn't done. "Wait," Hayden called out. "You forgot your parting gift." Hayden reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. She tossed it onto the table. It tumbled open, revealing Reagan's original wedding band, a simple gold loop she had thought was lost months ago. "Vincent gave it to me to resize." Hayden smiled, her eyes gleaming with malice. "But honestly, it's too cheap for my taste. Take it. Consider it a bonus." Reagan looked at the ring, then at Vincent. He didn't even blink. He was checking his phone, already moving on to the next deal, the next conquest. The man she loved was dead. In his place sat a monster in a three-piece suit. Reagan grabbed the ring, not to keep it, but to keep from collapsing. She walked out of the Sapphire Lounge into the pouring rain, the envelope of divorce papers clutched in her hand as the world she knew dissolved into the wet pavement. 3 weeks later, Reagan sat on the floor of a cramped studio apartment that smelled faintly of mildew and boiled cabbage. It wasn't hers, it belonged to Jade Knight, her best friend since high school, and the only person who hadn't blocked her number after Vincent's smear campaign. Reagan stared at her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror. Dark circles bruised the skin under her eyes. She had lost weight. Her collarbones were sharp ridges against her pale skin. "Eat," Jade said, kicking the door open with her hip, carrying 2 steaming containers of take-out noodles. Jade was a firecracker, short, muscular, with dyed purple hair, and a job as a mechanic that paid the bills better than Reagan's non-existent income. "You look like a Victorian ghost, and it's freaking me out." Reagan managed a weak smile, taking the container. "I'm not hungry, Jade. I checked my email. Another rejection." "From the temp agency?" Jade asked, sitting on the futon. "From everyone," Reagan sighed, picking at a noodle. "Design firms, administrative roles, even the coffee shop down the street." Vincent wasn't joking. "He's blacklisted me. Liam Walker has been calling potential employers, telling them I embezzled from Dawson and Associates." "That slippery weasel," Jade growled, stabbing her chopsticks into her food. "We should sue them for defamation." "With what money?" Reagan countered. "They froze the accounts, Jade. The $5,000 they promised. Liam found a loophole in the credit card debt Vincent racked up in my name. I technically owe them money." Reagan looked around the small room. Sketches were taped to the walls. Intricate, beautiful architectural drawings she had done in a fever state over the last few weeks. It was the only way she could cope. When the world felt chaotic, she created structure on paper. Arches, beams, light sources. Order. "These are good, Rhea," Jade said, softening. She gestured to a sketch of a modern library with a glass atrium. "Like, really good. Better than anything Vincent the Vulture ever produced." "It doesn't matter," Reagan whispered. "I don't have the license. I dropped out of the certification program to work 2 jobs so Vincent could finish his master's. I'm a ghost designer. I don't exist." "Then we make you exist," Jade said firmly. "Look, there's a rumor. I heard it from a guy who brings his Aston Martin into the shop. The Reyes Group is looking for a lead consultant for the new Skyline project. Reagan choked on her water. The Reyes Group. Jade. That's Cole Reyes. He's a titan. He eats firms like Vincent's for breakfast. He's not going to hire a disgraced housewife living on a futon. He's looking for boldness, Jade insisted. The guy said Reyes hates the standard proposals. He's rejected 3 major firms already. He's doing an open blind submission for the initial concept. No names, just the work. Reagan looked at the sketch on the wall. The library. It wasn't a library. It was a sanctuary. It was everything she wanted to feel. Safe, enlightened, open but protected. Blind submission? Reagan asked. Totally anonymous. Deadline is tomorrow at midnight. Reagan felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt since the night at the Sapphire Lounge. A pulse, a heartbeat of ambition. Vincent had stolen her credit, her money, and her past, but he couldn't steal her mind. I need paper, Reagan said, her voice gaining a fraction of strength. And I need your laptop. For the next 24 hours, Reagan didn't sleep. She poured 5 years of repressed creativity into a digital rendering. She designed a tower that defied the skyline, a structure of twisting glass and steel that looked like a flame frozen in ascent. It was aggressive, emotional, and technically perfect. She didn't design it to be safe. She designed it to scream. She submitted the file at 11:58 p.m. under a pseudonym, Phoenix. 2 days later, the email came. Not a rejection, an invitation. The Reyes Group requests the presence of the designer Phoenix at the annual Builders Gala this Saturday at the Grand Hotel. Mr. Reyes wishes to discuss the acquisition of your concept. Reagan stared at the screen, her hands shaking. We have a problem, she whispered to Jade. What? Jade asked, peering over her shoulder. That's amazing. The Builders Gala, Reagan said, turning pale. Vincent is the keynote speaker. He's receiving the Innovator of the Year award for the Riverside project, the project I designed. So? Jade grinned, a dangerous light in her eyes. Sounds like the perfect time to crash a party. I have nothing to wear. I have no car. I'm a pariah, Jade. Jade stood up and walked to her closet. She pulled out a garment bag she had been hiding. I've been saving this for a special occasion. And I can borrow the Aston Martin from the shop for 3 hours. The owner is in Europe. He won't mind. She unzipped the bag. Inside was a dress of liquid silver, simple, elegant, and devastating. You're not going as Vincent's wife, Jade said fiercely. You're going as the woman who's about to bury him. The Grand Hotel ballroom was a cavern of opulence, vibrating with the low hum of power and the clinking of crystal. Chandeliers the size of small cars dripped light onto a sea of black tuxedos and designer gowns. The air was thick with the scent of expensive lilies, roasted duck, and ambition. Reagan stood at the velvet-roped entrance, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to turn around, to run back to the safety of the cramped apartment and the mildew smell. Here, she was exposed. Here, she was the enemy. But then she felt the fabric of the dress Jade had lent her, liquid silver. It moved with her like a second skin, cool and armor-like. It was modest yet daring, a column of moonlight in a room full of artificial glitter. Jade had pulled Reagan's chestnut hair into a severe, sleek, high ponytail that exposed the elegant, vulnerable line of her neck and her sharp jawline. She wore no jewelry, she had none left, but the austerity of the look made her striking. She didn't look like a wife, she looked like a weapon. "Invitation?" the doorman asked, looking down his nose at her. Reagan handed him the printout of the email from the Reyes Group. He scanned it, his eyebrows shooting up. He looked at her, then back at the paper. "Phoenix, right this way, madam." She stepped into the room. It took a moment, but the ripple effect began. It started at the tables nearest the door, whispers behind manicured hands, heads turning, eyes widening. Reagan Ford, the disgraced, discarded wife, had returned to the scene of the crime. Is that her? I thought she was in rehab. My God, look at that dress. Who is she wearing? She has some nerve showing her face here. Reagan kept her chin high, though her knees felt like water. She scanned the room, looking for a contact, a friendly face, anyone from the Reyes group. Instead, she found him. Vincent was holding court near the massive ice sculpture of the city skyline. He looked triumphant, flushed with success and vintage champagne. He was surrounded by potential investors, gesturing broadly as he recounted a war story about zoning permits that Reagan knew was a lie. Clinging to his arm was Hayden Jensen. Hayden was a vision in garish crimson. Her dress was covered in sequins that caught the light aggressively, and she wore a diamond necklace that probably cost more than Reagan's parents' house. She laughed at something Vincent said, throwing her head back in a performance of adoration. Then Vincent turned. His smile dropped instantly, sliding off his face like wet clay. His eyes narrowed, scanning Reagan from the silver hem of her dress to her defiant eyes. For a second, Reagan saw a flash of something unexpected: regret, lust, but it was instantly incinerated by a flare of rage. He handed his drink to Liam Walker, who stood nearby like a faithful, oily shadow, and marched toward her. Hayden followed, her eyes gleaming with the predatory delight of a shark sensing blood. "What the hell are you doing here?" Vincent hissed, stopping inches from her face. The smell of expensive scotch on his breath made Reagan's stomach turn. "I told you, Reagan. You are not welcome in my world anymore. Did you not read the restraining order I threatened?" "It's a public gala, Vincent," Reagan said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I have an invitation." "You? An invitation?" Hayden laughed, a shrill sound that drew the attention of the surrounding tables. "Did you wait tables to get in? Or are you looking for a rich old man to pay your rent now that the free ride is over?" "Actually," Vincent sneered, "she's probably here to beg. Look at her. No jewelry, no ring. She's desperate." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Do yourself a favor, Reagan. Leave before I have you thrown out. You're embarrassing yourself. You don't belong here. You never did." Reagan felt the old shame rising, the conditioning of 5 years telling her to apologize, to shrink, to disappear. But then she remembered the sketch, the tower, the phoenix. "I'm here to meet someone," Reagan said, finding a reserve of steel she didn't know she possessed. "I'm here on business." "Business?" Vincent laughed loudly, playing to the gathering crowd. "What business? The business of being a leech? Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, spreading his arms, "my ex-wife, the woman who thinks drawing stick figures on napkins makes her an architect." Laughter rippled through the sycophants surrounding him. It was a nightmare. The music seemed to stop. The room went quiet, hundreds of eyes boring into her. "Security!" Vincent shouted, waving at a large, burly guard near the exit. "Get over here. This woman is trespassing. She's mentally unstable and harassing my fiancé." The guard, a man with a thick neck and little patience, pushed through the crowd. He didn't ask questions. He saw a wealthy man in a tuxedo pointing at a woman, and he acted. He reached out and grabbed Reagan's upper arm. His grip was bruising, his fingers digging into her flesh. "Let's go, miss," the guard grunted, pulling her roughly. "Let go of me!" Reagan cried out, the physical pain snapping her composure. "I have a right to be here. Get your hands off me." "Drag her out," Vincent commanded, his face twisted in a cruel sneer. "And make sure she lands in the gutter where she belongs. Maybe the rain will wash off the stench of desperation." Reagan struggled, tears stinging her eyes. She was going to be humiliated again, thrown out like trash. It was the Sapphire Lounge all over again, but on a grander stage. She looked around, pleading with her eyes for someone to intervene, but the crowd just watched, drinking their champagne, entertained by her destruction. "No one touches her." The voice was not a shout. It was a rumble, low, resonant, and vibrating with an authority that instantly paralyzed the room. It cut through the tension like a guillotine blade. The crowd didn't just turn, they parted. They scrambled to get out of the way. Walking through the center of the ballroom was a man who made Vincent Dawson look like a child playing dress-up in his father's suit. He was over 6'3", a tower of broad shoulders and lean muscle encased in a bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than Vincent's car. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that seemed carved from granite. Sharp jaw, high cheekbones, and eyes the color of a turbulent storm. Cole Reyes, the billionaire, the titan, the man who owned half the city and terrified the other half. He walked with a predator's grace, his gaze locked on the guard's hand gripping Reagan's arm. Vincent's arrogance faltered. He straightened his tie, a nervous sweat breaking out on his forehead. "Mr. Reyes, I didn't know you were attending. We were just removing a crasher, an unwanted guest who—" Cole didn't look at Vincent. He didn't acknowledge him. He walked straight to the security guard, stopping inches from him. The size difference was negligible, but the power difference was absolute. "Release her," Cole said softly. "Now." The guard, pale and sweating, let go of Reagan's arm as if it had turned white hot. He stepped back, murmuring an apology, and vanished into the crowd. Reagan rubbed her throbbing arm, looking up at Cole. Up close he was devastating. The energy radiating off him was intense, controlled, and dangerous. He looked down at her, and for a moment the storm in his eyes quieted. He didn't look at her with pity. He looked at her with recognition. "Are you Phoenix?" Cole asked. Reagan nodded, her voice caught in her throat. "Yes." Cole turned to Vincent. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He finally deigned to look at the man. "Mr. Reyes," Vincent tried again, his smile straining, desperate to salvage the moment. "I assume you're looking for real talent for the Skyline project. My firm, Dawson & Associates, is receiving the Innovator Award tonight. This woman, she's my unstable ex-wife. She's a nobody. She doesn't even have a degree." Cole stared at Vincent. It was a look of absolute withering disgust. It was the look a lion gives a hyena. "You call the architect of the Skyline Tower a nobody?" Cole asked, his voice carrying clearly to the back of the silent room. Vincent blinked, his smile twitching. "What? No, you're mistaken. That's impossible. She doesn't design. She fetches coffee. She fixes typos. She designed the proposal that made your entire portfolio look like amateur hour," Cole said, stepping closer to Vincent. "And from what my background check tells me, the structural ingenuity in the Riverside project, the one you are accepting an award for tonight, bears her mathematical signature, not yours." Gasps rippled through the crowd. This was a public execution. Liam Walker looked like he wanted to vomit. Hayden's mouth hung open, her crimson dress suddenly looking cheap. "That's a lie," Vincent sputtered, panic rising in his chest. "She's manipulating you. She's a fraud." Cole turned his back on Vincent, dismissing him as if he were an insect unworthy of attention. He turned to Reagan. He saw the red marks on her arm where the guard had grabbed her. His jaw tightened. He offered his arm to her. It was a gesture of old-world chivalry, a stark contrast to the brutality she had just endured. "I have been looking for a partner who understands that structure requires a soul," Cole said to Reagan, loud enough for the press to hear. "I found her." He looked over his shoulder at the security team, then at Vincent, his eyes promising retribution. "If anyone disrespects her again," Cole announced, his voice dark and final, "they answer to me." He paused, letting the weight of his protection settle over her like a warm cloak. Then he leaned in, his eyes locking with Vincent's. He decided to drop the nuclear option. "Unhand her," Cole said to the ghost of the guard's grip, then looked at the room. "She's not just my lead architect," Cole announced. a hint of a dangerous smirk touching his lips as he looked down at Reagan. "And she is certainly not your victim anymore." He leaned in close to Reagan, his voice dropping to a husky whisper that only she and the stunned, horrified Vincent could hear. "Play along," Cole murmured. He straightened up, wrapping a protective arm around her waist, pulling her flush against his side. He addressed the crowd with the confidence of a king claiming his queen. "Gentlemen, step aside. That's my future wife." Vincent dropped his champagne glass. It didn't shatter this time. It hit the thick carpet with a dull, pathetic thud. Reagan looked up at Cole, shock coursing through her. But his grip was firm, grounding her. For the first time in 5 years, she wasn't falling. She was rising. The silence inside the back of the Maybach was absolute, a sharp contrast to the chaotic din of the ballroom they had just fled. The city lights streaked past the tinted windows, blurring into lines of gold and red, but Reagan Ford saw none of it. Her gaze was fixed on the man sitting across from her. Cole Reyes was typing on a tablet, his demeanor cool and detached, as if he hadn't just declared a complete stranger his future bride in front of the city's elite. Reagan's hands were still trembling. She gripped the leather seat, forcing herself to breathe. "Mr. Reyes," she started, her voice raspy, "you need to stop the car." Cole didn't look up. "We are going to my office. We have contracts to sign." "Contracts?" Reagan laughed, a brittle, hysterical sound. "You just told 300 people I'm your fiancé. You use me to humiliate Vincent. I appreciate the rescue, really I do. But I am not a prop for your corporate games. I am an architect." Cole stopped typing. He set the tablet down and looked at her. The interior light of the car caught the sharp angles of his face, illuminating eyes that were intelligent, calculating, and surprisingly tired. "I know you are an architect, Reagan," Cole said quietly. "I've studied every line of the Phoenix submission. I've also studied the blueprints for the Riverside project, the Metro Tower, and the Dawson private residence. The stylistic DNA is identical. You didn't just fix Vincent's work, you were the work." Reagan felt a lump form in her throat. For 5 years she had screamed into the void, hoping someone would notice her contribution. To hear it acknowledged so casually by the most powerful man in the industry was overwhelming. "That doesn't explain the lie," she countered, strengthening her resolve. "Why future wife? You could have just hired me." "If I hired you," Cole said, leaning forward, "Vincent would have sued you for breaking your non-compete clause. He would have dragged you through court for years, claiming you stole proprietary secrets. He would have buried you in legal fees until you starved." Reagan went cold. She hadn't thought of that. Liam Walker would absolutely do that. "But," Cole continued, "as my fiancé, you are untouchable. Vincent cannot sue a member of the Reyes family without declaring war on my entire conglomerate. He's a bully, Reagan, and bullies are cowards. He won't touch you now. I bought you freedom." "At what cost?" Reagan asked sharply. "What do you get out of this fake engagement?" Cole sighed, rubbing his temple. "My board of directors is old-fashioned. They believe a man of my age should be settled. They are threatening to stall the Skyline project funding unless I show stability. I need a partner who understands the business, who can play the part of a power couple, and who is desperate enough to agree to a crazy proposition. You need protection and a career. I need a fiancé and a lead architect." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. "It's a 1-year contract. You lead the design on the Skyline Tower. You get full credit. You get a salary of $500,000. We maintain the engagement publicly. In private, we are colleagues. After 1 year, we amicably separate, and you walk away with a portfolio that will make you the most sought-after architect in the country." Reagan stared at the paper. It was madness. It was dangerous. But then she thought of Vincent's sneer. She thought of the ramen noodles in Jade's apartment. She thought of the sketches taped to the wall, dying to be built. I have conditions, Reagan said, her voice stealing. Cole raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Name them. I don't just want credit, I want control. If I design the skyline, I choose the materials, I choose the engineers, and I want a clause that says if Dawson and Associates tries to interfere, you crush them legally. A slow, genuine smile spread across Cole's face. It transformed him, softening the hard edges of his predator persona. Done, Cole said, extending a hand. Reagan looked at his large hand. She thought of her wedding ring, the cheap gold band Hayden had thrown at her. She took Cole's hand. His grip was warm, firm, and reassuring. One more thing, Reagan said, not letting go. I don't sleep in your bed, and I don't do your laundry. Cole chuckled, a low rumble. I have staff for the laundry, Reagan, and as for the bed, let's just focus on the building for now. The transformation began at dawn. Reagan woke up, not on Jade's futon, but in a guest suite at the Reyes penthouse that was larger than the entire house she had shared with Vincent. The sheets were Egyptian cotton. The view was a panoramic sweep of the city she was about to conquer. Jade had been summoned early, arriving with a suitcase of clothes and a look of pure, unadulterated glee. Okay, so let me get this straight, Jade said, holding up a Chanel blazer. You are fake engaged to Batman. You're making $500,000, and you're going to be the boss of the biggest project in the state. Can I just say, Karma is a barista, and she got your order right. Reagan laughed, pulling on the blazer. It fit perfectly. Cole had sent a stylist, but Reagan had insisted on keeping her own style, sharp lines, muted colors, professional but artistic. She wasn't Hayden, she wasn't a doll. It's not a victory lap yet, Jade, Reagan warned, checking her reflection. She looked different. The fear was gone from her eyes, replaced by a cool determination. I have to walk into that firm and command respect from people who have been working there for 20 years. And Vincent, he's not going to stop. Let him try, Jade scoffed. He's probably crying into his protein shake right now. When Reagan arrived at the Reyes Group headquarters, the lobby fell silent. She walked with her head high, flanked by two of Cole's security detail. She took the private elevator to the top floor where the executive suites were located. Cole was waiting for her in the conference room. The entire senior design team was gathered around a massive oak table. They were mostly older men, seasoned architects who looked skeptical. Gentlemen, Cole said, standing up as Reagan entered. This is your new lead architect for the Skyline project, Ms. Ford. A heavy murmur went through the room. With all due respect, Mr. Reyes, said a man with thick glasses, Ms. Ford has no license history. She's known for being Vincent Dawson's wife. Reagan didn't wait for Cole to defend her. She walked to the head of the table, placing her tablet down. She connected it to the main screen. I was Vincent Dawson's wife, Reagan corrected, her voice projecting clearly. Which means I was the uncredited engine behind his success. But we aren't here to discuss my marital history. We are here to discuss the structural load of the Skyline's atrium. She pulled up a 3D model. It was a complex schematic of the twisting tower she had designed. Your current engineering team says a cantilevered glass observation deck is impossible at this height due to wind shear, Reagan said, zooming in on the model. They are calculating using standard static load parameters. But if we use a dynamic dampening system, similar to the one used in the Taipei 101, but modified with a cross-bracing truss here and here, she pointed to the screen. We can reduce the sway by 40% and increase the glass surface area by 20%. The room went quiet. The architects leaned in. The man with the glasses squinted at the math on the screen. He pulled out a calculator, tapped furiously for a minute, then stopped. He looked up at Reagan, his skepticism replaced by shock. The math checks out, he muttered. Actually, it's brilliant. Cole watched from the side, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He wasn't looking at the screen, he was looking at Reagan. He looked proud. Halfway through the meeting, Reagan's phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from an unknown number. "You think you've won? You're playing a dangerous game, Reagan. Meet me. We need to talk." V. Reagan stared at the message. Her heart skipped a beat, a reflex of old fear. But then she looked around the room. She looked at the team listening to her, the view of the city, and Cole, who gave her a subtle nod of encouragement. She picked up the phone and typed back, "Contact my lawyer." Then she blocked the number and turned back to the meeting. "Now, let's talk about the foundation." That afternoon, chaos erupted in the lobby. Reagan was leaving for a site visit when she heard a familiar screech. "I demand to see him. Tell Cole I'm here." Hayden Jensen was at the reception desk, looking frantic. Her perfect facade was cracking. Her hair was slightly frizzy, and her eyes were wild. Reagan signaled her security to hang back and approached slowly. "Hayden!" Hayden spun around. Her eyes narrowed into slits. You witch. What did you tell him?" "I didn't tell him anything," Reagan said calmly. "Cole does his own research." "Vincent is losing his mind," Hayden spat. "Investors are pulling out of the firm. They say if Cole Reyes doesn't trust Dawson, why should they? You're ruining us." "I'm not doing anything to you, Hayden," Reagan said, stepping closer. "Vincent built his reputation on a lie. When you build on a cracked foundation, eventually the house comes down. That's Architecture 101. You should have learned that before you wrecked my marriage." "He's going to destroy you," Hayden hissed, stepping forward aggressively. "He has dirt on you. He knows things." "He knows nothing," Reagan said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. "He knows the version of me he created in his head, the weak one. She doesn't exist anymore." Reagan turned to the receptionist. "Ms. Jensen is leaving. Revoke her guest pass." As security escorted a screaming Hayden out, Reagan felt a strange sensation. It wasn't triumph. It was pity. She realized Hayden was just another accessory Vincent would discard when she stopped being useful. 2 months later, the city's planning commission held a public hearing for upcoming major developments. It was a crucial step for the Skyline project, but also for Dawson and Associates' new venture, the Harbor View complex. The auditorium was packed. Reagan sat in the front row beside Cole. He rested his hand on the back of her chair, a possessive, protective gesture that the cameras ate up. They had been dating for 8 weeks, and the media was obsessed with the Cinderella story. But Reagan was focused on the stage. Vincent was presenting. He looked thinner, his eyes manic. Without Reagan to manage his schedule, his diet, and his stress, he was fraying at the edges. But worse, without her to check his work, he was flying blind. "The Harbor View," Vincent announced, gesturing to a flashy rendering on the screen, "will revolutionize the waterfront. We are using a revolutionary composite concrete to allow for thinner support pillars, maximizing the view." Reagan squinted at the technical specs displayed on the side monitor. She knew that composite. She had researched it years ago for a different project and rejected it. It was porous in high salinity environments, like a harbor. She leaned over to Cole. "He's making a mistake. A big one." "Let him," Cole whispered. "It's not our project." "No," Reagan said, shaking her head. "Cole, that concrete degrades when exposed to saltwater mist. In 5 years, those pillars will crumble. If that building goes up, people could die." This was the test. The hard karma wasn't just about revenge. It was about the truth. If she stayed silent, Vincent would fail eventually, but innocence would be hurt. If she spoke up, she looked like the bitter ex-wife trying to sabotage him. Reagan stood up. The room quieted. Vincent froze mid-sentence, glaring at her. "Sit down, Reagan. This is a professional forum." "I am speaking as a professional," Reagan said, her voice ringing out without a microphone. "Mr. Dawson, the specs for your composite indicate a Type 4 mixture. Are you aware that the ASTM standards for saline environments require a Type 5 sealant, which is incompatible with that specific concrete blend? Vincent laughed nervously. Of course I'm aware. We adjusted the formula. Don't try to bore the council with technical jargon you don't understand. I understand that you copied those specs from a proposal I wrote in 2019 for the Inland Warehouse project, Reagan said, holding her ground. I recognize the font. I recognize the typo on page 4 where tensile is spelled tinsel. You didn't adjust the formula, Vincent. You copy-pasted a file you didn't read. The commissioners on the panel began shuffling their papers, looking at the specs. Is this true, Mr. Dawson? Asked the head commissioner. This is a serious safety allegation. She's lying. Vincent shouted, his composure shattering. She's just trying to humiliate me. She's a scorned woman. Then explain the chemical composition, Reagan challenged. Explain how the calcium hydroxide in that mix reacts with chloride ions from the sea spray. Explain the expansion coefficient. Vincent opened his mouth. He looked at the screen. He looked at Liam Walker, who was burying his face in his hands. He looked at Hayden, who was staring at him with horror. He didn't know. He had no idea. He was a salesman, not an architect. I will have my team submit a report, Vincent stammered, sweating profusely. The permit is denied pending a full independent structural review. The commissioner slammed his gavel. And Mr. Dawson, if we find you falsified safety data, we will be reviewing your license. Vincent stood alone on the stage, the spotlight harsh and unforgiving. He looked small. Reagan sat down, her heart pounding. She didn't feel happy. She felt a heavy, somber relief. Cole leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. You saved lives today, and you destroyed him without raising your voice. I didn't want to destroy him, Reagan whispered, looking at her ex-husband retreating from the stage. I just wanted him to be real, but I guess for Vincent, reality is the poison. As they left the hearing, the paparazzi swarmed. But this time they weren't asking about the divorce. Ms. Ford, can you tell us about the skyline design? Reagan, is it true you're the brain behind Dawson's past hits? Vincent watched from the shadows of the side exit as Cole guided Reagan into the waiting car. He saw the way Cole looked at her, with respect. He saw the way the city looked at her, with awe. For the first time, Vincent Dawson realized that Reagan hadn't been the anchor holding him down. She had been the wings holding him up, and he had cut them off mid-flight. But the nightmare for Vincent was only beginning. Because back at his office, Liam Walker was waiting with bad news. The investors for the Riverside project, the one Reagan had saved, had heard about the hearing. They were demanding an audit of every blueprint Vincent had ever signed. The unraveling of Dawson and Associates didn't happen with a bang, but with the quiet, terrifying shuffle of paper. 3 days after the Planning Commission hearing, the forensic auditors arrived at Vincent's glass-walled office. They didn't knock. They simply walked in, flanked by state regulators, and began boxing up files. Vincent sat at his desk, watching his empire dismantle piece by piece. He looked hollow. The bespoke suits that used to armor him now hung loosely on his frame. He reached for the intercom to call Liam Walker, but the line was dead. Liam had resigned via email at 4:01 a.m. that morning. The lawyer had seen the writing on the wall and the potential prison time for aiding in fraud, and had fled to a non-extradition country, reportedly with a significant portion of the firm's liquid assets. Vincent, a voice cut through the silence. It wasn't a comfort. It was Hayden. She was standing in the doorway, but she wasn't looking at him with concern. She was looking at the scene with repulsion. She held a suitcase. Hayden, Vincent croaked, standing up. Thank God. Look, it's a misunderstanding. I just need to call your father. If the zoning commissioner makes a call, this all goes away. Hayden let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. My father? My father is currently holding a press conference to denounce you. He claims he had no idea you were falsifying safety data. He's throwing you to the wolves to save his own career, Vincent. Vincent staggered back as if slapped. But we're partners. We're getting married. Married? Hayden looked at the engagement ring on her finger, a massive diamond Vincent had bought on credit, and pulled it off. She tossed it onto the desk. It spun noisily, a final echo of their transactional relationship. I don't marry failures, Vincent, Hayden said coldly. I bet on you because I thought you were the next Cole Reyes. But you're just a fraud who got lucky because his wife did his homework. I'm done. You can't leave me, Vincent shouted, desperation cracking his voice. I have nothing else. You should have thought of that before you threw away the only person who actually loved you, Hayden said. She turned on her heel, her red soles flashing, and walked out of his life without looking back. Across town, the atmosphere was polar opposite. Reagan stood on the 40th floor of the skeletal Skyline Tower. The wind whipped her hair, but she didn't feel the cold. She felt alive. The steel girders she had drawn on a napkin were now massive, tangible realities beneath her feet. It's breathtaking, a voice said. Cole emerged from the construction elevator, wearing a hard hat that somehow didn't diminish his commanding presence. He walked over to the edge, standing beside her. They looked out over the city lights. The dampeners are working, Reagan said, pointing to the massive counterweights. The sway is less than 2 inches. It's safer than any building in the district. I wasn't talking about the building, Cole said softly. Reagan turned to him. The contract had said strictly business, but in the months of late-night schematic reviews and site visits, the lines had blurred. They had argued, laughed, and challenged each other. Reagan had found in Cole an intellectual equal, someone who didn't want to dim her light, but wanted to stand in it with her. The year is almost up, Reagan said, her voice quiet. The contract ends next month. Does it? Cole asked. He turned to face her fully. Reagan, I told you I needed a fake fiancé to satisfy the board. That was true, but I didn't tell you the rest. He took a step closer. The wind howled around them, but in that small space, it was silent. I didn't know I needed you, Cole confessed, his eyes searching hers. Not just for the tower, for the silence, for the way you look at the world and see how to fix it, while everyone else just sees the cracks. I don't want the contract to end. I want to tear it up and start something real. Reagan's heart hammered. This was what she had dreamed of. Not the money, not the status, but being seen, truly seen. I'm not the same woman I was a year ago, Cole, she whispered. I'm not looking for a savior anymore. I know, Cole smiled, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. That's why I'm falling in love with you. I don't want to save you, Reagan. I want to build with you. The final confrontation didn't happen in a courtroom or a boardroom. It happened where it all began, at the Sapphire Lounge. Reagan was there for an industry mixer, celebrating the completion of the Skyline's exterior. She was wearing a deep emerald gown, radiant and confident, surrounded by admirers and peers who were asking for her opinion on design trends. Suddenly, a hush fell over the room. Vincent Dawson stood at the entrance. He was unrecognizable. His hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, and he smelled of cheap whiskey. He was wearing the same suit he had worn the day the auditors came, now wrinkled and stained. Security moved to intercept him, but Reagan raised a hand. Let him in. She wasn't afraid anymore. Vincent stumbled toward her. The crowd parted, watching the train wreck unfold. He stopped a few feet away, swaying slightly. Look at you, Vincent slurred, pointing a shaking finger at her. Queen of the city, while I lose everything. You lost everything yourself, Vincent, Reagan said, her voice calm and level. I didn't make you cut corners. I didn't make you lie to investors. And I certainly didn't make you cheat. I made you, Vincent screamed, the vein in his neck bulging. You were nothing, a little draftsman in a skirt. I gave you a name. You gave me a shadow. Reagan corrected, stepping forward. She towered over him, not in height, but in presence. You took my work, my ideas, and my youth, and you put your name on them. You didn't make me, Vincent. You stole from me, and when you couldn't steal any more, you starved. I can fix it, Vincent whispered, his anger suddenly dissolving into pathetic begging. He fell to his knees, grasping at the hem of her dress. Reagan, please, talk to the board. Tell them I helped you with the skyline. Just give me a little credit. I can rebuild. I just need one win. Please, baby, I still love you. The room was dead silent. It was the most pathetic display anyone had ever seen. Cole stepped forward, his face dark with fury, ready to remove Vincent physically, but Reagan placed a hand on Cole's chest, stopping him. She didn't need protection. She needed closure. She looked down at the man kneeling before her, the man she had once thought was her entire world. She felt nothing, no hate, no love, just a profound sense of indifference. You don't love me, Vincent, Reagan said softly. You love what I did for you. And the sad part is, if you had just been honest, if you had just been a partner, I would have given you the world. We could have built it together. She gently pulled her dress from his grasp. Goodbye, Vincent. She turned around and walked back to Cole. Security moved in then, gently lifting the sobbing man and escorting him out. The tragic figure of Vincent Dawson was removed from the narrative, not with a bang, but with a whimper. 2 months later. The opening of the Reyes Ford Skyline Tower was the event of the decade. The building soared into the clouds, a twisting needle of light that redefined the city's silhouette. It was a marvel of engineering and art. Reagan stood at the podium, looking out at the thousands of people gathered in the plaza. The ribbon had just been cut. Architecture is not about concrete and steel. Reagan spoke into the microphone, her voice echoing through the plaza. It is about trust. It is a promise that the structures we build will hold us, protect us, and lift us up. For a long time, I forgot that I had to build that trust within myself first. She looked at the front row. Jade was there, crying happy tears, giving 2 thumbs up. And next to her was Cole. He wasn't looking at the building. He was looking at Reagan with an expression of absolute adoration. This tower is proof that you can rebuild from the ashes, Reagan concluded. That you can take the broken pieces of your life and turn them into something that touches the sky. As the applause thundered, Reagan walked off the stage and into Cole's arms. We did it, she said. You did it, Cole corrected. He reached into his pocket. The contract expired at midnight last night. Reagan smiled. So I'm unemployed? No, Cole said. He dropped to one knee. The crowd gasped. The cameras flashed blindingly. He pulled out a ring, not a gaudy diamond like Hayden's, but a custom piece. It was platinum, designed with the same twisting elegance as the tower she had built. A structure of strength holding a rare blue diamond. Reagan Ford, Cole said, his voice thick with emotion. I don't want a business partner. I want a wife, a real one. Will you marry me? Reagan looked at the ring, then at the man. This time there was no coercion, no desperation, just a choice. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes. He kissed her, and the crowd erupted. The fallout was swift and absolute. Vincent Dawson was indicted on 12 counts of fraud and embezzlement. Without Reagan to fix his mistakes or Liam Walker to hide them, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. His firm was liquidated and his name was scrubbed from every building he had ever claimed credit for. Hayden Jensen moved to Europe, living off a dwindling trust fund, forever known as the woman who bet on the wrong horse. Reagan and Cole didn't just get married, they built an empire. They launched a scholarship fund for underprivileged architects, specifically women who had been overlooked. Reagan became the first female recipient of the National Architecture Gold Medal. She never visited Vincent in prison. She was too busy building the future. The story of Reagan Ford wasn't just about a woman who got revenge. It was about a woman who realized that her worth wasn't in the ring on her finger, but in the mind that wore the crown. She learned that the best revenge isn't destruction. It's success so bright it blinds the people who tried to bury you in the dark. And that is the story of Reagan Ford. It's a powerful reminder that no matter how hard someone tries to diminish you, your talent and your truth are things they can never steal. Vincent thought he could break her, but he only cleared the ground for her to build something greater. If you've ever felt like you were doing all the work and getting none of the credit, or if you've ever had to rebuild your life from zero, let this be your sign. Your skyline moment is coming. Don't let the Vincents of the world convince you that you're small. You are the architect of your own life. If you enjoyed this story of justice, redemption, and a little bit of billionaire romance, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a drama-filled story. And tell me in the comments, do you think Vincent deserved a harsher sentence, or was losing his ego the ultimate punishment? Thanks for watching, and remember, the best view comes after the hardest climb. See you in the next video.